excuse me. Our opening hymn asks us not to be afraid of some change. But we kind of have to ask, what kind of change? Changing our beliefs and attitudes about things? A new political regime? How about a war? Another financial crisis, another Great Depression? The collapse of civilization, the end of the world? I think I might be afraid of some of those things. How about you? Before we go any further, I have to confess that I'm not a very nostalgic person. I don't long for the good old days, perhaps because the good old days were also the bad old days. But I, and we, because we're mostly boomers, we survived the oil shocks and stagflation of the 1970s. There were major recessions in the 80s and 90s, the Great Recession of 2008, and a whole variety of other economic crises along the way. At one point in the 1970s, the prime rate was 21%. Wouldn't want to pay that mortgage. And of course, along the way, there were the many social changes and political crises. The assassinations and riots of the 60s. Vietnam. The Great Disco Inferno. Small-scale wars too numerous to mention. The end of the Cold War. The swine flu. Record-breaking droughts beginning to appear. The rise of the personal computer and the internet. More genocides. Famines. The rise of China and India. 9/11. Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. Mass shootings, global warming and climate change, the war on terror, gas at $5 a gallon, the Tea Party, Occupy Wall Street. Now, most of us have probably forgotten about a lot of that. It's kind of faded into memory, but we lived through it. And here we are with our current wave of inflation and social instability. The COVID pandemic, the widespread adoption of the smartphone, and all the social consequences of that, and social media. The left versus right culture war, and our increasingly polarized tribal politics. More government deadlock, the rise of AI. Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Ukraine. Storms and floods and rising sea levels and fires. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my. But looking even further back, it seems like these kinds of things are pretty much the regular state of affairs for humanity. There's always a crisis. There's always something going on. So what's the big deal? I admit it's hard to keep that kind of perspective when such events affect us all. Immediately on a very personal level. But somewhere in the back of my mind is the thought that real people, our ancestors, our great grandmas and grandmas, survived these kinds of things and much worse. And they had kids, and those kids had kids, and so on. And here we are. We're the descendants of millennia of tough, creative, adaptable, persistent survivors. That's the gift that they passed on to us. We too are creative, adaptable, persistent, and tough. And like them, we must also deal with the day-to-day impact of whatever it is that the world brings to our doorstep. And the world doesn't just bring us hard times.
My apologies.
Little music break there.
Here we go.
The world doesn't just bring us hard times. It brings good things as well. How many of us have had a hip or a knee joint replaced or heart surgery that saved our lives? how many of us can travel to far-off places in a matter of hours? How many of us can reach into our pocket or purse for a phone and call our kids or grandkids on the other side of the country? Yeah. Like the Paul Simon song says, these are the days of miracle and wonder. And the truth is that miracles and wonders can be just as hard on us as wars and famines and plagues. Indeed, good times can tear us apart, while hard times sometimes seem to bring us together. I'm reminded of the old Chinese parable of the farmer and his horse. A farmer and his son had a beloved horse who helped the family earn a living. And one day the horse ran away and their neighbors exclaimed, "Your horse ran away. What terrible luck." And the farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not." A few days later, the horse returned home, leading a few wild horses back to the farm as well. And the neighbors shouted out, "Your horse has returned and brought several horses home with him. What great luck." And the farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not." And later that week, the farmer's son was trying to break one of the horses, and she threw him to the ground, breaking his leg. And the neighbors cried, "Your son broke his leg. What terrible luck." And the farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not." And a few weeks later, soldiers from the National Army marched through town, recruiting all the boys for the army. And they didn't take the farmer's son because he had a broken leg. And the neighbor shouted, "Your boy is spared. What tremendous luck." To which the farmer replied, "Maybe so, maybe not. I guess we'll see." And these days, it seems like everything's cast in a binary light, either or. Us versus them. Good versus evil. We're oppressors or victims. My email inbox is filled with urgent messages to stop the latest outrage that will bring about the end of the world as we know it, unless I send in my $5. In our binary culture these days, it's tough not to get attached to things being good or bad, because that's easier for us, okay, no? It's easier for our brains to think in terms of good or bad rather than maybe some. But there's a calm in maybe so when you really think about it. There's a peace in not attaching to an outcome. This is, of course, easier to do when things are going well. But when things go south in your life, or you come across a conflict or struggle at work, or the world seems like it's going to hell and the commies or the fascists are taking over, the ability to perceive your situation in an unattached, objective, maybe so way brings the promise with it that, at the very least, clarity, insight, and wisdom will follow you out the other side. Buddhist and Taoist wisdom tells us that everything rises and everything falls away. Things turn into their opposites. Midnight holds the seeds of morning. Noon holds the seeds of night. Change is the only constant, and we cannot know what it will bring. We can only go with the flow, surfing the waves of change. We can't control events all the time, but we can control our response to them. And our ancestors, by and large, knew that it was better to embrace those changes than to resist them. In our Western heritage, this attitude comes to us through the concept of amor fati, a Latin phrase that may be translated as love of fate, or love of one's fate. This is the attitude in which we see everything that happens in our lives is happening for a reason, even if we don't know what that reason is. If it happened, it was meant to happen. And I'm glad that it happened when it did. I'm going to make the best of it. I'm going to use whatever obstacles and adversity as the means to grow and overcome and take me on to the next thing, whatever that may be. Seems odd to love what we never wanted to happen in the first place. But what other worse adversities might this one be saving us from? What might we learn from this unchosen experience? What good, equally unexpected results might result from it? Admitting that we don't know the answers or the outcomes allows us to treat each and every moment, no matter how challenging, as something to be embraced, not avoided. To not only be okay with it, but love it and be better for it, even if it sucks at the time. To love our fate is also to love the world. In the words of Hannah Arendt, what is most difficult is to love the world as it is. Loving the world means neither uncritical acceptance nor contemptuous rejection, but the unwavering facing up to and comprehensive of that which is. To see the world in all its terribleness and beauty and love it still. We will fail at this. Our vision will dim. Our comprehension will become confusion. Yet, again and again, we must return to the task of knowing and embracing reality with clear hearts and clear minds, and with a deep and abiding curiosity for what happens next. Loving the world is not an easy path. Few will take it. Yet I believe that those who do will arrive at a place of awe and wonder and joy, at a place of calm in the midst of the whirlwind of life, at the peace of maybe so. Our faith calls us to travel that path together, to learn from each other, to encourage each other, to help each other when we tire or stumble, to remind each other to love the world and all things in it, no matter what. And perhaps, in the end, that love will be reflected back to us from every corner of our world. May it be so. Thank you.
Thank you, Munro. So it's this time of the service where we call the sharing of responsibility or taking up the offering. And I wanted to read something about that. It's called As a Fire Exists by Burning, and it's by a UU person named John Saxon. This religious community exists by its mission as a fire exists by burning. But a fire cannot burn without fuel. And it is the time, the energy, the imagination, the vision, the creativity, the compassion, the love, and the financial support of the members and friends of this community that fuels our mission to nurture, to sustain a welcoming, inclusive, and diverse liberal religious community that transforms lives and serves the world. Your support, the free and generous support of each and every member and friend of this community, is what fuels this community and its mission. And without your support, the flame of justice, community, and love cannot burn brightly to warm ourselves and be a beacon in a world threatened by division and fear. So the offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation of our shared hopes and values. Oh, sorry. Are you not going to use your pockets? Yeah. Muchas gracias.
For our closing words today, I'd like everyone to open up the gray hymnal to number 634. In the back under the readings. And let's do a responsive reading together as our closing words. Everybody ready?
Yep.
Got a couple people still. Gotta be? All right, we're all on board here. Now is the time for turning.
The leaves are beginning to turn from green to red and orange.
The birds are beginning to turn and are heading once more toward the south.
The animals are beginning to turn to storing their food for the winter.
For leaves, birds, and animals, turning comes instinctively.
But for us, turning does not come so easily.
It takes an act of will for us to make a turn. It means breaking old habits.
It means admitting that we have been wrong, and this is never easy.
It means losing face. It means starting all over again, and this is always painful.
It means saying, I am sorry.
It means recognizing that we have the ability to change. These things are hard to do.
But unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways.
God, help us to turn from callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love, from pettiness to purpose, from envy to contentment, from carelessness to discipline, from fear to faith.
Turn us around, O God, and bring us back toward you.
Revive our lives as at the beginning.
And turn us toward each other, God, for in isolation there is no God.
And let us join in the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together. We are so lucky. Okay, let's rise and join hands for our benediction. May not look like one, but it's a circle. May love and skill guide our hands. May love and courage fill our hearts. May love and wisdom light our minds. May love flow through us and walk among us. As we live our lives, and learn to love the world. Amen. Amen. Shalom and blessed be.
Amen. Amen. Shalom and blessed be.
Go in peace.
Good job.
Thanks, Joe.
Munro.
Okay.